In this video, I interviewed Darren Voros, a well-established real estate investor and developer from Toronto, sharing unique reports to 1. Find out if rents and housing prices are going down, 2. What real estate developers think is the most effective way to make homes affordable faster. I'd like you to watch this video and tell me in the comments where you stand on this issue and if you want to buy a home here in Canada in the future. This table has the answers we need. It analyzes different tools the government can use to lower housing costs by increasing the supply. I did not let Darren know about this ahead of time so that we could get his real thoughts as a businessman. I want to do something unexpected. I want to throw some government solutions at you as a developer, as a real estate investor with many years of experience, and see your thoughts about what effects those might have. What do you think?
Sure, sounds good.
Ready for that? Let's start from the very red, negative, right here. Which says implement rent controls. Darren, for us simple human beings, what is rent control and why are they doing it?
Rent control is, moderating how much a landlord can increase your rent year over year. And there are some provinces that have rent control. Ontario is one of them. And there are some provinces that don't have rent control. Alberta is one that doesn't have rent control. But if you look at those two provinces side by side, and you look at the housing affordability issue or the housing supply issue, rent control really has no bearing on either one. In fact, it's actually usually counterintuitive to introduce rent control, because as a landlord, let's say I can only increase my rent, like in Ontario here, 2% per year, okay? If a tenant stays in a building year after year, it's really difficult for them to be able to vacate that unit. And if I can only increase my rent 2% every year, why would I ever improve my property? Why would I ever make that property better for my tenant? I'm not going to spend any money on it. I'm going to spend as little money as I possibly can because I know that I can only increase the rent by 2%. Whereas in Alberta, let's say, if I know that if I increase the value of my property by doing renovations and making those units nicer, I can get a higher quality tenant that's going to pay me a little bit more, which actually helps keep the market moving and keeps those units in much better condition.
With that said, do you think that landlords get greedy and then they start milking their tenants, getting the most out of them without this rent control measure?
That's the flip side of it. And there is that argument that the tenants would say, well, they're just going to, jack my rent so they can get me out so they can improve it to get a better tenant. But again, it goes back to supply and demand. That only works in a shortened, in a reduced supply market, right? So in Alberta, for instance, you haven't seen rents climbing at the rate they are here in Ontario because you just don't have the amount of demand in that province that you have here. So it's not a rent control issue. It just is, again, it's a supply and a demand issue.
What do you think the future holds for Canada with the government lowering the number of international students we take in?
We're in the middle of a housing crisis right now. And I think that's one of the pressures that's made the government do what they're doing right now. We don't have enough housing for the Canadians that are here right now. I don't think that this is an immigration problem. I think that it has nothing to do with how many international students we let into the country. It has everything to do with the development process, which is essentially broken here in Canada, and it just takes too long to bring projects to the market. And if you know anything about economics, and I'm not an economics major by any means, but I understand supply and demand, and that's what we're dealing with. We just have an undersupply and we have an over demand, and until we fix that, that's really the main issue with the housing problem.
There are 3 important graphs I want to share on the immigration side. First, look here. See the blue line? It shows a significant drop in the number of NPRs, like international students, we admit into the country. It's projected to stay low for the next couple of years. Second graph. The blue line represents taking in fewer international students. Do you see how it's supposed to slow down the economy, especially here, starting in April 2024? Lower inflation, lower prices, lower demand means a drop in rents, right? Well, look at the 2024 Canada Rental Market Trend Report by Live.Rent. Many people left Ontario. Coincidentally, Alberta received a lot. This means interprovincial migration is here to stay and might drive up prices in some places. As many developers say, all eyes are on the supply, And there is one measure the government can take to combat this problem that not everyone will like: increase as of right zoning for mid and high-rise buildings.
As of right zoning, meaning that if I go and buy a lot in a certain area of town, I'm allowed to build multifamily buildings on that property, right? Most lots in any given municipality have a restriction on how many units you can put in that building. But by increasing the amount of units you can put on any given lot, of course, what are you doing? You're incentivizing developers to go in there, put multiple units on that lot, which increases the supply and decreases the demand. I am not surprised at all that if you go to mid-rise or high-rise and a lot is zoned for you to do that, and you don't have to go through a zoning change, which can take years and cost developers hundreds and hundreds of thousands of dollars, of course, this is going to have a direct impact on the market, and it's going to have a direct impact on affordable housing.
What about the infrastructure to sustain that population? Let's say we have 1,000 people move in. What happens to the neighborhood? Or why are we not doing this now?
You can't add 1,000 units to a sewer system that can only support, 100 residents. And so we have to balance that. But that happens through things like development charges, infrastructure upgrades. And to think about it, the more units that we add to the market, the more the developers have to pay in development charges. Those are charges that go back to the municipality to help support the infrastructure growth. And also we have a higher tax base. If you have 1,000 residents in an area where you used to have 2 or 3, you have, that many more people paying property taxes, which can then take that money and reinvest it into infrastructure. And that's what needs to happen.
Another lever the government has is to encourage developers to build rental housing through financial incentives, like removing HST.
We realize it's the right time to step up with removing the federal GST on purpose-built apartment buildings. And we're calling on provinces, and we've heard already from a number of provinces.
Before we get to the most interesting part of the video, I have an important message to you. And this applies to current landlords and aspiring landlords, no matter if it's just a single unit you have that you want to rent out or an entire high-rise building. Live.rent is Canada's safest platform, and if you're not on it, here's why you might be missing out big time. It's an all-in-one platform where you can list, advertise, screen tenants, sign leases, and collect payments. One of the biggest fears all landlords have is, what if I give the keys to a bad person who destroys my property and doesn't pay rent? To solve this problem, Live.rent created a comprehensive trust score. It complies essential factors like credit score, risk assessment, trustworthiness, and income to rent ratio. They make the process of document collection simple for all potential tenants, even those coming from abroad, while significantly lowering the risk for you. Second, to make your life easy and remove the paperwork hassle, Live.rent offers digital lease signing with complete compliance in Ontario and British Columbia, soon to be Canada-wide. So all you need to do is sign and collect money. Speaking of money, if you are in Ontario or British Columbia, you can collect rent payments directly on the platform. It sets automatic reminders for your tenants to make sure you don't have any headache while getting paid. If you're interested in Live.rent, sign up in the description of the video and post unlimited listings for free. For you as a developer, how effective was it to remove GST?
If I build a $5 million asset in the city of Toronto, I had to pay the full HST value on that $5 million. Now I get to offset that with what it costs me to build it, but the cost of the land, I can't use that because that doesn't get included in that calculation. So let's even say that my cost was half. If it cost me $2.5 million to build and my property's worth $5 million at the end, well, I'd have to pay the difference on the HST. So I'd have to pay $2.5 million of HST, 13% on $2.5 million. And that just goes straight into the government's pocket and out of mine. And so who do you think I'm going to pass that cost on to? I'm going to pass it on to my tenant, right? Because it's cost me 13% on $2.5 million. So it makes a big difference by eliminating that. And again, it's another financial incentive for people to get into development because private enterprise essentially is going to solve this problem.
From a different perspective though, if you save that 13%, can't you still charge your tenant the same?
Well, again, that goes back to supply and demand. Of course, when there's an imbalance of supply and demand, then yes, most people would argue that developers are just going to take that profit, they're going to charge the same amount of rent, and they're just going to make more money. And that might be the case when there's still that supply and demand imbalance. But if we continue to increase the supply, and all of a sudden my cost, and this is the same, you go to any restaurant, right? Go to McDonald's. They can charge $5 because they're on a burger because their cost is $3, where the person next door, maybe their cost is $4. They can charge $5 as well, or they can charge $6, but then people are going to go to McDonald's because they can get it for $5. And it's the same thing in the housing market. If my cost is less than my neighbor next door, who's also a developer, and I can get better tenants and I can fill my buildings quicker by offering incentives for less rental rates, then that's going to be an incentive for me to be able to do that.
When you walk in your local downtown, you see all these glass buildings and probably don't even realize that half of them are empty. This is why another way to get more housing supply is to reuse office buildings.
Well, think about what happened in the pandemic. Everybody basically went to work from home. So what happened to all these buildings in the downtown core, or even in the residential sectors? We've got a lot of commercial real estate and we've got a lot of office space that's sitting vacant. So instead of tearing those buildings down, they're trying to repurpose them, right? Repurpose them as rental buildings, repurpose them as housing. And municipalities want their downtown cores to be vibrant. They want people to live downtown. But what ended up happening a few years ago, probably 10, 20 years ago, was people started commuting out to the suburbs because they wanted a little bit more space, right? And they drove in to work downtown, but then they drove out to the suburbs to live. Well, then municipalities had to expand all of their services. And now they're trying to get people back into the core because the services are already there. They've already got hospitals, they've already got transit, they've already got all these things built. So they want to incentivize people to take these office towers and these commercial spaces, convert them to residential.
What I asked next can help many local governments solve the problem. Inside your developer circle, because you have a large network, you're a developer yourself in Toronto, what do you think could be the most effective measure taken by the government now to lower the housing costs for Canadians for the years to come?
If there's one measure that I could choose, it's reducing the regulatory time. So I'll give you an example. We submitted an application. We already have the approval for a 10-unit building in Toronto. We submitted for a building permit. I believe it was back in August. It's now March, and we still don't have a building permit, right? So we're sitting there waiting. We're ready to build. We're sitting there waiting for the people at the municipality, the plans examiners and the traffic people to sign off on the right of way and all of these things. That's the bottleneck, right? So we can introduce financial measures, we can reduce the cost for developers, but until we reduce that red tape at the municipal level, that's the challenge. Because what we need projects to get greenlit faster and get into the ground faster.
What can the provincial government do to mandate the city, or is there some kind of correlation you see as a developer?
They have to incentivize them or penalize them. Those are the only two options, right? So do you want more money for your municipality? Then what you need to do is reduce your red tape on development, right? Or they need to penalize them. Say you've got 14 days to turn around a permit application, and if you don't do that in 14 days, you're going to be penalized. Those are the only two measures that really work.
Many countries around the world had to swallow a painkiller during the pandemic, printing money, inflation. What we see now is the aftermath. This is why I believe we need to work together, businesses, governments, citizens, to lay the foundation to solve this problem in the coming years. This country is you and me. It's all of us making it great. If you'd like to learn more about real estate investing, check out Darren's channel. Also, check out Lived Out Rent's channel to stay ahead of the rental game. The links will be in the description. And don't forget to leave a comment and like under this video. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in this one next.